Hello, Bio 2 students. I'm recording this just in case because of lack of time. I'm unable to discuss all of the problems in the practice problems. So you will be able to to check on your progress if you're able to solve it. And also, I know that I was able to discuss some of the answers here in class, but I'll try to answer the complete set of problems for the practice problems, included in the lecture. Okay, so medyo labo-labo to. If you need time to process, feel free to pause, and I'll just record this as one continuous discussion. Okay, but I will discuss each problem in detail. Okay, so starting with the first four problems in the set of practice problems is all about monohybrid crosses. Okay, I'm sure we discussed most of these in class, but let me just do this a little slower and in a more deliberate manner in case you missed something. Okay, so you can go back to the slides or the printout if you need to view the problems themselves. I will just read them out loud. Pasensya na. Or I don't know if I don't really have time to edit kasi. Anyway, just refer to your handout or the the slides. Okay? So practice problem number 1. Let me check kung kita ha. Malinaw naman. Okay, I'll try to make my handwriting a little bigger. So for number 1, I'll just read it out loud. A single gene in pea plants has a strong influence on flower color. The gene has 2 alleles, purple, big P, which is dominant, and white, small p, which is recessive. So there are 2 questions here. Letter A, what are the genotypes and phenotypes of the offspring of a cross between a big P plant and a small p plant? And then letter B, what are the genotypes and phenotypes of the offspring of the F1? Okay? So this is essentially a monohybrid cross by definition. So let's look at what's described here in the problem. So it talks about a single gene. Okay? So it's one gene, one character with 2 traits. Okay? So we have the gene that controls flower color, okay, in the garden P. And it says here that we have a gene, we have an allele for purple that's defined here as big P because it implies what? That it's dominant. Okay, so big P for purple flower color. So you'll probably notice as we go along that I use block letters or yung print na tinatawag natin, and sometimes I use script na letters. And this helps me distinguish kasi between yung capital letters at saka yung small letters, lalo na kung magkahawig sila. Okay? So for P, for example, I use capital P, which is a block letter for purple, and then the recessive small p in script for white. Okay? So again, the purple flower color is said to be dominant over the white flower color. Ay! So, after we've defined kung ano yung alleles natin, sabi dito, letter A, what are the genotypes and phenotypes of the offspring of a cross between big P, and small p, Okay, so letter A, we have our parents are big P, and small p. Okay? So, given this genotype, ano yung magiging genotypes at phenotypes ng offspring? Okay? So, ano mangyayari dito? We have we determine what gametes are produced by each parent. Okay? Now, since they're homozygous, as we've described them in our discussions, if it's homozygous, then it produces only one type of gamete. Okay? So, this homozygous dominant parent only produces gametes that contain, of course, the dominant allele. And this homozygous recessive parent produces only gametes that contain the recessive allele. Okay? So, what will happen is that when these gametes fuse, you will get offspring that have both the dominant and recessive alleles. So, the F1, the first filial generation, so the offspring of the P, are all heterozygotes. Okay? Big P, small p. So, this is the genotype of our F1. Okay? And then it asks what the phenotypes are. So, this is our genotype, and based on what we defined as the dominant and recessive flower color, this is purple. Okay? Kasi dominant si big P, si purple over white. Okay? So, small p is masked, big P is exhibited, so purple flowers. Okay? So, this is the genotype and the phenotype of our offspring. Okay? So, nasagot na natin si letter A. Okay? Letter B. What are the genotypes and phenotypes of the offspring of the F1? Okay? So, letter B, offspring na F1. So, we determined that F1 is yung heterozygous na purple flowered individuals produced by the P generation. Okay? So, with this, we now look at what gametes are produced by these individuals. Okay? Pareho naman sila ng genotype. So, pareho din sila ng mapoproduce na types ng gametes. Now, we also know that if an individual is heterozygous, okay, what will happen is that it will produce gametes that are different from each other. Okay? Specifically, may gametes na ang laman ay big P at may gametes na ang laman ay small p. Okay? Since they have the same genotype, this parent also will produce gametes that have big P and gametes that have small p. Okay? And this is based, of course, on our law or on Mendel's law of segregation. During meiosis, these alleles, okay, that are found on homologous chromosomes are separated in the production of gametes. Okay, so ano mangyayari ngayon? We can do our Punnett square. Okay, and we have our square. Sorry, medyo paling. Okay, gametes from this parent here, and then here on top would be the gametes from this parent here. So we combine those gametes, big P, and here big P and small p. Like I mentioned before, by convention we write the dominant allele first if there's a dominant allele. So alam mo agad kung ano magiging phenotype niya kasi kung may dominant allele, yun yung exhibit niya. Okay? So here we wrote big P first and then small p. Now here from left and then the top, big P, small p. Okay? And then this compartment here, small p and then small p. Okay? So these are the genotypes of the F2. So this is already our second filial generation. Okay? So F2, big P, or homozygous dominant for purple flowers. We have heterozygous for purple flowers, and we have homozygous recessive for white. Okay? So what are the phenotypes? Nabanggit ko na. Titignan natin yung genotypes, ano yung respective phenotypes nila. So this is purple, purple, and purple. So we have purple flowered plants and also white. Okay. So notice that I'm only writing just genotypes and just phenotypes. Okay? Wala akong sinasamang ratio. Kasi hindi naman hinihingi nung problem yung phenotypic at genotypic ratios. It's just it just asks for the genotypes and the phenotypes. Okay? So, that is the answer to practice problem number 1. Okay? Hindi pala kita yung ilalim. Sorry. Ayusin natin yung view. Hindi ko na uulitin ha. Check ko na lang kung anong kita. Para mamarkahan ko dito sa aking desk kung hanggang saan kita. Here. Okay. So, hindi pala siya hanggang baba. Okay. So, with that, we will proceed to problem number 2. Okay. Okay. So, let me read the problem ulit. Number 2. A cross between a pea plant that produces yellow peas and a pea plant that produces green peas results in 100% yellow pea offspring. Okay. So, yun yung statement. So, merong follow-up questions isa-isa. Okay? Pero, tignan muna natin yung pinaka-bungad ng question. So, you have a cross between, let's just write it out, yellow. Okay? So, a plant that produces yellow peas crossed with a plant that produces green peas. Okay? And this results in all yellow offspring. Okay? So, what does this tell us? Okay? So, presumably we have the yellow, the plant that produces yellow peas carries the alleles for yellow. Okay? And then the plant that produces green peas carries the allele for green. Now, when you mix them together, you will get a hybrid. But apparently, the hybrid produces only yellow peas. Okay? So, what does this imply? Okay, yun yung letter A. Letter A, question A, which allele is dominant in this situation? So, given that ito yung nangyayari, okay, dun sa cross na yan, this tells us that dominant si yellow. Right? Okay? Kasi nung pinag-mate mo yung opposing traits, ang naging trait ng offspring, lahat yellow. Okay? So, this tells us that yellow is dominant. So, we can designate yung capital letter, the capital letter for the dominant allele, yellow, and the recessive allele with the lowercase or the small letter. Okay? So, yun yung sagot natin sa letter A. Kung ano yung dominant, okay? Kung ano yung dominant allele, we say na it's the yellow, allele for the yellow peas. Okay? Letter B. What are the genotypes of the yellow pea plants in the initial cross? Okay. Although, hindi naman siya clearly defined as purebreds, okay? But in this case, I suppose we can assume, okay, that these are true breeding pea plants. Okay? Kasi lahat nung naging anak nila ay yellow. Okay? Green, kung green yung recessive, alam natin na yung parent na may green na peas ay homozygotes, diba? That is the only genotype that you're able to say for sure kung ano siya. Basta individual siya na nag-exhibit ng recessive trait, it must be homozygous for the recessive allele. Diba? Kasi otherwise, kung may kahalong dominant allele, hindi mo makikita yung recessive trait. Okay? So, sure tayo na si green parent ay homozygous recessive. Okay? Now, para magkaroon tayo ng offspring na lahat ay yellow, dapat si yellow parent na may dominant trait, kasi basta may dominant trait, diba, sure ka na may capital letter. Meron kang dominant allele. Na hindi ka sure though kung ano yung pangalawang allele. Okay? Makikita mo lang yon kapag kinross mo siya sa homozygous recessive. And in this case, lahat ng offspring ay yellow. And that tells us that actually, our parent, our yellow peed parent is purebred. Because all of the offspring produced in this cross are yellow. Okay? So, these are the genotypes of the yellow pea plants in the initial cross. Okay? So the parents are big Y, and it's crossed with small y, small y. Okay. So if two heterozygote plants or heterozygous plants are crossed, what is the genotypic ratio of the offspring? Okay? So if you write this cross out, actually what will happen is that you have F1 na 100% heterozygous, right? And this would exhibit yung trait na yellow peas. Okay? So letter C asks us for the results of a cross between dalawang heterozygote. Okay? So it's essentially an F1 cross where you have two heterozygotes, okay? Yellow peas, pero hybrid siya. Okay? So ano mangyayari? You can do your Punnett square again, determine the gametes for the parents. Since they're heterozygous, they will have gametes that contain big Y and gametes that contain small y. Same genotype, so same for this parent here. So if you do the Punnett square for this one, okay, write the gametes on the side, on the left, and on the top. Sorry, may space naman, ano, nagulo ko tuloy. Okay. So, ano mangyayari ngayon? Again, we will just combine the gametes to see the genotypes of the possible offspring. Okay. So, these are the genotypes of the F1 cross. So, if you cross an F1 plant with another F1 plant, you will get these genotypes in the offspring. Okay? So, what is the genotypic ratio? So, yun yung tanong sa C eh. If two heterozygote plants are crossed, what is the genotypic ratio of the offspring? So, as you can see, we have three different genotypes. We have big Y, this one. It's 1 out of the 4 possible outcomes. Okay? And then we have big Y, small y, which is 1, 2. Okay? 2 out of 4 possible outcomes ay big Y, small y. Yung heterozygous. And then we also have the genotype small y, which is also 1 out of 4 chances na pwede maging small y. So we have the genotypic ratio 1 homozygous dominant, big Y is to 2 heterozygous, big Y, small y is to 1 small y, homozygous recessive. Okay? Letter D. So this is C. Okay? Letter D. What proportion of the offspring will produce green peas? Okay. What proportion of the offspring will produce yellow peas? So it's asking us naman kung ano yung proportion ng magkaibang phenotypes. So it's asking for how many yellow and how many green. Okay? So ilan yung yellow? Based on the genotype, we can determine what the phenotypes are. Okay? Homozygous dominant, since yellow yung dominant, this is yellow. Okay? This is also yellow. Heterozygous dominant kasi. This is also yellow. Okay? So, meron tayong 3 na yellow out of the 4 possible outcomes. Okay? Yun namang green, meron tayong I'm taking this off, but I can also write it here, 1. Okay? Out of the 4 possible outcomes. So, that is our answer to letter D. Okay? Kasi ang tinatanong, what proportion of the offspring will produce green peas? 3 fourths, 3 out of 4. And then, yellow pala yun, sorry. What proportion of the offspring will produce green peas? 1 out of 4. Na green. Tapos, what proportion of the offspring will produce yellow peas? 3 out of 4. Okay? And then, letter E, asks us what is the phenotypic ratio among the offspring. Okay? So, what we just do is we combine these different phenotypes into a phenotypic ratio. Okay? So, ito yung genotypic ratio natin kanina. So, phenotypic ratio naman natin, okay, we have 3/4 yellow is to 1/4 green, or 3 yellow is to 1 green. So, the answer natin sa A, sa B, okay, sa C, ang cross at genotypic ratio, D at E. Okay? Malinaw ba? Okay na? So, let's proceed with number 3. We're still discussing some problems on the monohybrid cross. Okay? Number 3, if two pea plants hybrid for a single trait produce 60 pea plants, how many of the offspring would you expect to show the dominant trait? Letter A. And then B, about how many of the offspring would show the recessive trait? Okay? So, paano natin to isosolve? Wala naman kasing nakaspecify na traits or characters. Okay? Basta sinabi lang na hybrid, si parents. So, ano ibig sabihin ng hybrid? They are heterozygotes. Okay? So, whatever gene or character this is referring to, you can assign naman your own letters. Okay? Let's just use A. Pinakamadali. Saka madaling ma-distinguish yung big letter sa small letter. Okay? So, if you have a hybrid, ang genotype niya ay heterozygous, so big A, small a. Okay. So, two pea plants that are hybrid for a single trait, so pareho sila ng genotype. Okay? Pertaining to that trait A or character. Okay? So, they produce a total of 60 offspring. Okay. Yung given natin. So, about how many of the offspring would you expect to show the dominant trait? How many of the offspring would show the recessive trait? Okay, so paano natin to gagawin? Pwedeng Punnett square ulit. Right? Okay. Pwede rin yung sige, yung Punnett square na lang. Para hindi ko kayo lituhin. Doon ko na lang kayo lilituhin dun sa mas mahihirap na topics. Okay. Loko lang. Okay, so if we do the Punnett square again, this parent produces two different gametes, those containing big A and small a. Same as this parent, may big A, may small a. Okay, so if you do the Punnett square, I shouldn't draw it so close to that. Para hindi. Hindi siya pantay. Oh well. Okay, so there's our Punnett. Here is our Punnett square. And now let's identify kung ano yung genotypes nung offspring. So this one is big A, big A. Big A, small a. Ay, ito muna. Big A, small a. And then this is small a, small a. Okay. So, these are the genotypes of our offspring. Okay? Ang question niya specifically, it's asking about the phenotypes. Okay? So, once you determine kung ano yung outcomes, okay, let's identify kung ano yung phenotypes. Genotypes kasi ito. Okay? So, A blank, meaning, pwedeng si homozygous for big A, at C, heterozygous for A, okay? Ilan sila? 1, 2, 3. Right? So, 3 out of 4. 3/4, okay? With respect to the total. And then, C, recessive trait ay i-exhibit lang ni homozygous recessive. Okay? And that would be only 1/4. Okay. So, paano natin isa-solve? We get 3/4 of 60. And to say na yun yung mag-exhibit ng dominant trait. So, 3/4 of 60 is what? 45? 45 of plants. Plants ba sabi ka? Plants. With the dominant trait. And then, 1/4 naman is 15. So, 15 plants will exhibit the recessive trait. Okay? Straightforward naman siya. In-apply nyo lang. Meron lang na given a number and you know what the ratio is of the phenotypes, then you can solve for what the question asks for. Okay? Number 4, the last of the monohybrid cross na questions. Oh, meron siyang bleed through. Hindi ko na yung gagamitin. Okay. Number 4. I'm using medyo makapal para kita. Kita ba? Silipin ko. Masyadong maliit eh. Anyway, maybe I'll stop after this one and review the video to see kung masyadong maliit yung sulat ko. Anyway, I can't use my whiteboard, guys, kasi paubos na yung paubos na yung ink nung marker. I already ordered more, but no. Oh well. Di pa dumadating. Anyway, number 4. Let us assume that eye color follows a Mendelian mode of inheritance. Disclaimer na naman ha, in real life, hindi ganon ka straightforward ang inheritance ng eye color, in humans especially. Okay? We will discuss this later, okay, under polygenic inheritance. But for the sake of this discussion, okay, and to give it a little flavor naman, related to sa isang sikat na storya. Okay? So, let us assume that eye color follows a Mendelian mode of inheritance in which green eyes, small b. So, dinefine na niya. Small b daw, si green eyes. Okay? Is recessive to brown eyes, big B. Okay? So, baka kung nagtataka kayo, bakit B ang ginamit ko dun sa green eyes, kasi I used B for brown kasi is the dominant trait. Although, may mga genetics purists, ang ginagamit nilang letter ay yung nagsastand, yung first letter ng recessive trait. Yung iba, ganun. Ano sila? Yun yung medyo old school, okay, na genetics. But you know, when you're solving problems, if it works for you, diba? Sabi ko naman, you assign the letters yourselves. Unless it's given. Okay? Like in this case. Okay. Sorry. I got diverted. So, what's the situation? Green-eyed Lily. So, we have the mother. Her name is Lily. Okay? And she has green eyes. Okay? And then, brown-eyed James are the parents. So, ang kwento niyan ay meron silang anak. So, James has brown eyes according to this problem. Okay? So, these are your parents. So, green-eyed Lily and brown-eyed James are the parents of green-eyed Harry. So, meron silang offspring. Well, we assume that Harry is male. And we know that he's male because we know the story. Okay. So, Harry has green eyes. He has his mother's eyes. Sabi dun sa story. Anyway. Sorry. Letter A. Ginawa kong genetics problem, si Harry Potter. Okay, letter A. What are the genotypes of James, Lily, and Harry in terms of eye color? Okay. So, ito, ay, hindi ko nilagyan ng name. Ano ba? Hinape si Harry Potter. Okay. So, we have mother, father, child. Okay. Green-eyed mother, brown-eyed father, green-eyed son. Green is recessive to brown eyes. Okay. So, genotypes daw. Hinihingi genotypes. Anong pwede nating ma-determine? Ito talaga yung tip. When you're working with a genetics problem, identify first which of the individuals you're talking about has the recessive trait. Kasi, for sure, alam mo na agad kung anong genotype niya. Okay? So, Lily is said to have green eyes. For an individual to have a recessive trait, again, he or she has to be homozygous for it. Okay? So, Lily has to be small b, small b. James, on the other hand, has brown eyes. Okay? Brown eyes, alam natin, dominant siya. So, ibig sabihin, meron siyang at least one na big B. Okay? We don't know kung ano yung second allele yet. Okay? Basta alam lang natin na brown-eyed siya. Now, meron daw silang anak na may green eyes, si Harry. So, green-eyed Harry has a genotype of small b and small b. Kasi nga, he exhibits the recessive phenotype. Okay. So, may clue na tayo. Right? We can determine what James's genotype is based on yung result nung cross. Ginawang genetics experiment. Okay. So, since si Harry ay green eyes, yung isang small b, of course, galing sa nanay. Because this nanay can produce gametes that contain only small b. Homozygous si nanay eh. Okay? Pero si tatay, brown-eyed siya. Pero, para maging small b, tong second allele niya, kailangan meron din siyang nakuhang small b galing kay tatay. Remember that this gene pair comes from, di ba, yung contribution ng nanay at tatay. So, the second allele here, small b, must also come from James. So, this means that James is actually heterozygous. Right? Right. Okay? So, madali lang, ano? So, yan na yung sagot natin. Lily is small b, James is heterozygous, big B, small b, and Harry is small b, small b. Okay? Letter B. So, this is letter A. Letter B. Question B. 4B. If James and Lily had not died, drama, no? Leaving Harry an orphan, more drama, what would be the probability that James and Lily would have a brown-eyed daughter? Okay. So, nagsispekulate na tayo ngayon. Unang-una, dun, fictional character naman to, no? Pero namatay na sila dun sa story. Pero, knowing what we know about their genotype, what would have been the probability that they would have a brown-eyed daughter? Okay? So, if you want, you can pause here and try to solve this on your own. Anong gagawin mo lang? Gagawin mo yung cross ni Lily at ni James. Tama ba? So, let's try that. So, Lily and James. Okay. Again, identify gametes produced. This is small b lang. Tapos si James, may gametes na may big B, may gametes na may small b. Okay. Sorry for the interruption. The camera stopped recording. Maximum length reached. Anyway, so let's continue with yung letter B. Okay. So, we're doing the cross, okay, between Lily and James. Now, we already identified kung ano yung gametes na mapaproduce nila. So, we can do a Punnett square based on that. But sometimes, actually, when you have a homozygous parent, hindi mo na kailangang isulat yung small b, small b. Okay? Gawin ko yung shortcut, ha, in case hindi nyo pa na-encounter to. Hindi siya necessarily dapat na square. Okay? So, kung si Lily ay isang kind lang ng gamit ang pinoproduce niya, small b, pwede namang yun lang ang isulat nyo. So, you don't need to repeat it here. Okay? And then, James naman has two kinds of gametes produced. So, big B and small b. Okay? So, when you do your Punnett square and determine the genotypes of possible children, okay, you'll see that half the time, heterozygous siya na brown-eyed, and half the time, homozygous siya na for small b, so meaning green-eyed. So, 1/2 chance of having brown eyes. Okay. Yun yung sagot. Ang tanong ay, what would be the probability that James and Lily would have a brown-eyed daughter? Okay. So, hindi lang yung eye color yung concern natin. Gusto nating malaman din yung probability, kung ano yung probability na daughter. Kasi yun yung tanong, brown-eyed daughter. So, how do we determine that? We don't really need to use alleles to define sex. We can actually use just the sex chromosomes. We know that females are XX and males are XY. Okay? So, you can actually do a Punnett square using the sex chromosomes. So, a female would be homozygous for X. So, all the gametes contain X. We've discussed this, diba, sa gametogenesis. And then, the males naman, when they undergo meiosis, produce two different types of sperm. May sperm na nagkikarry ng X, may sperm na nagkikarry ng Y. Okay? So, if you do the Punnett square using the sex chromosomes, okay, so the female, here on the left, si Lily, X lang yun na po-produce ng gametes. The male produces X and also Y. So, if we combine, we'll get 1/2 chance of producing females and 1/2 chance of producing males. Daughter. Okay? So, we're interested in the probability of having a brown-eyed daughter. And what we need to do is combine these two probabilities and based on yung, diba, yung laws of multiplication and addition, ang magagamit natin dito ay multiplication. Kasi, ano ba ang definition nun? You use multiplication if you want two events occurring at the same time. What are those two events? Yung brown eyes sa offspring at yung pagiging daughter ng offspring. So, 1/2 times 1/2 gives us 1/4. So, that is our answer. 1/4 or 25% probability na magkakaroon ng brown-eyed daughter si James at si Lily, given their genotypes. Okay? So, I'll finish here muna. Ito yung first 4 problems dun sa practice problems. I will record another video for test cross and then another for the hybrid cross. Okay? So, see you in a bit. Bye!